Hello, I'm Charlie Worsham, your host for Mississippi on the Map, a podcast brought to you by Visit Mississippi. This podcast explores why Mississippi is the birthplace of America's music. Today on Mississippi on the Map, our guest is none other than Chris Stapleton, one of the most iconic voices in country music and music in general in this generation. I would argue that Chris has one of the great voices of all time. Back in April, I had the privilege of catching up with Chris at the Congress of Country Music in Philadelphia, Mississippi. On that day, Chris and his band performed, as well as Marty Stuart and his fabulous Superlatives, a concert at the Ellis Theater to raise money for the next phase of development for the Congress of Country Music, what will become a museum space and education center for the community of Philadelphia. Earlier in the day, they unveiled a couple murals around town, one honoring Chris's song Broken Halos. In my conversation with Chris, we talk some about Pop Staples, we talk about the blues and its impact on Chris's longtime collaborator, the late Mike Henderson. I'm so grateful to Chris for his time and his thoughtfulness, and grateful to Marty Stuart for the work he's doing in Philadelphia with the Congress of Country Music. This is my conversation with Chris Stapleton. Here we are, Mississippi on the Map with
in Mississippi.
It's our first field recording on the show. And earlier today, I spoke with Country Music Hall of Famer Marty Stuart, but I am so honored to sit with you, Chris Stapleton.
Well, thank you.
I mean, one of our heroes back in Nashville. You have kicked the door open for so many of us, and like Marty Stuart said, unveiling that mural earlier today, there's nobody waving the flag of American music with integrity quite like you are today. So thank you for that.
Well, that's high praise from both you and him. So,
man,
I appreciate that.
So, Chris, I know you're from Kentucky, and we're going to get into the great lineage of Kentuckians on music a little bit later, but I also know you're a Pop Staples fan. And
sure.
I fell in love with your version of Friendship, which led me to his version of Friendship, which led me to understand the connection between your guitar playing and his. And I was curious where that influence began for you, and tell me more about
Well, it's interesting. I think I was influenced by that without knowing I was.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we did that Pop Staples song. Dave said, hey, we should do the song. That was literally something that happened in the studio. And Dave said, I've got this song that I want somebody to cut. Maybe we can do this. And he played Friendship, and we cut it immediately after hearing it. As quick as we could learn it, we recorded it. And so that was kind of where that went. And then, Pop's played a jazz master a lot, and I also played jazz master a lot, which I think didn't necessarily come from me knowing that he played a jazz master or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just arrived there. I kind of got a jazz master because it was cheaper than a Strat or a Tele at the time.
Yeah.
And it's a way I could get an old guitar without having to pay, for the more expensive and popular Strats and Teles,
Right.
And so that's kind of how that happened. And then, through playing with Mike Henderson, who I wrote several things with, a lot of my use of delay or reverb are kind of kidnapped from him.
Yeah.
Going, no, you could just a little bit of this, and then you got a little bit of trim, but not enough so you can really tell that it's on. Those are all tricks from him.
Yeah. So you mentioned Dave. You're talking about Dave Cobb.
I'm talking about Dave Cobb.
Yes,
yeah, Dave Cobb. That's where that song came from.
Yeah.
Now back to the Pop Staples version of it. I of course played a jazz master, and we did this song. And we started recognizing that, Pops and I kind of have the same taste in guitars, and maybe a little bit of tremolo is involved. So we started hunting. The pedal that he used was it was from the late 40s. And so we bought two of them that were broken. And they're like a tremolo that has like it's a really weird mechanical device from the late 40s that didn't work. And we spent a bunch of money getting them fixed until we got them to do the thing. And so that was a rabbit hole we went down trying to chase Pop Staples, only to find out that you can't sound like Pop Staples unless you're Pop Staples.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I remember hearing from Dave that story of y'all trying to perfect the Pop Staples tremolo, and then Marty informed me that he referred to it as shake.
Yeah.
Which is
put some of that shake on there.
Put that shake on there.
Yeah. And Mavis would say the same thing when we played with her a few times. You got that shake on there.
Oh, I love it.
Which is cool.
That is cool. You mentioned Mike Henderson, and he was a longtime collaborator and friend of yours, I know. I know passed away a couple years ago, and one of the songs y'all wrote together is on that mural now, permanent piece of Philadelphia, Mississippi, Broken Halos. For those of us who know Mike Henderson, he may not be a household name and famous to everyone that's listening, but to those of us in Nashville, he's a legend.
And not just to guitar players in general.
Guitar players, yes. Not just as a country guy, but y'all were in Steel Drivers together, bluegrass band, and he was a renowned blues musician. Now, I know he was from Missouri, and I don't know if he was from the part that was close to the Mississippi River.
He was from Independence, Missouri is where he was from, yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, from your long relationship with him, if you can pick out any Mississippi influences of his.
Of his? I don't want to speak to his influences. He used to say, all of my influences are dead blues guys.
Yeah.
But he had a lot of Chicago too, and a lot of, but everybody that was blues, that's all he listened to, I think, growing up, I probably got a lot of it by proxy just because I was always chasing him.
Yeah.
First time I ever got into electric guitar, he showed up at my house with a guitar. He played those Silvertones with a lipstick pickups in them.
Yeah.
And he showed up with like a Dan Electro with one of those in it. And he goes, here, see if this solves your tone problems.
I love it. Amazing.
Yeah.
One of the songs I love y'all wrote together that you performed in your time with the Steel Drivers was Ghosts of Mississippi.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about writing that song and the inspiration behind it?
Man, well, I mean, as with any song I wrote with Mike Henderson, we would show up at 8 p.m. at his little. You wrote some with him too, probably. Yeah,
I never got to write.
You never wrote with Mike Henderson. Okay, well, here was the process. You showed up at his house. He had a little place outside of his house that he called the Chicken Shack, and you showed up at 8 p.m. and he would have, you'd sit at either end of a table, and you would have a whiskey or two or however many it took.
Yeah.
To get to the point to where you were past the point of rationality and awaiting inspiration. And those are his words,
Wow.
And so we would do that. And a lot of times he was very much a poet in that you would come in and he would have something on his mind or he'd have something he'd written in his book. And most of the songs that I wrote with Mike lyrically were that way. Like it was something that was on his mind. And I don't know what he'd been listening to or where it had come from. And he said, but a lot of times he would be so proud of the title that he had for the night. He would be like, I know what we're writing tonight, Ghosts of Mississippi. And I'd be like, well, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I remember most songs that we wrote. And then it was kind of up to me he would lean into me to find something, the melody in it or some chords maybe he wasn't thinking of because he would be straight blues all the time and keep it really, that way. And a lot of times we wrote another song called Death Row, and there's a great tape of him doing a straight acoustic blues version of it. A lot of songs would start there. It would be him having this blues idea, and we would try to stay in there and get there and then trick people into cutting it.
Yeah. Well, so much of my favorite music, and I mean, we're a stone's throw, good Lord, from Meridian, where the father of country music, Jimmy Rogers, grew up and developed his sound. So much of my favorite music is when the blues and country hold hands.
Yeah. I think they always are.
Yeah.
Even if we don't know they are.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And I think because so much of the blues are from here, I think we have to know that this is foundational. Mississippi's foundational to most American music, not just country or rock and roll, you name it.
Yeah.
The blues are in there.
That's right.
Even if you don't think that they are, because all you have to do is go back to who was the influence of the guy that was doing this?
Yeah.
And if his influences weren't blues players, the guy that influenced him,
their influences.
Their influences.
Yeah, it's going to get there eventually.
Yeah, you get there eventually.
Yeah,
and
the headwaters.
And that's the thing for me that is always interesting. And then people sometimes forget, and I think there's not enough credit given in that way to the blues in general, or and as we're talking here, I'm sure Mississippi.
It was right here in the Mississippi Delta where more than 100 years ago, black sharecroppers and laborers gave America its own musical identity. drawing on the sounds and traditions of their native Africa and the struggle of their American experience, the blues was born. This land was the epicenter of musical creativity, offering Saturday night liberation and salvation on Sunday morning. The sounds of Mississippi gave rise to gospel, gave country music its twang, gave R&B its soul, jazz its blue note, and rock and roll its king. If you love music, there's no better place to discover its roots and its future than in Mississippi, the birthplace of America's music.
So you mentioned that legacy from Mississippi. Now, you are from a state, as a Kentuckian, that has a bold claim to a lot of great American music.
That's true.
And I understand that you have a reason to be rightfully biased, but I will ask you anyway. I'll ask you anyway to put the hat on and tell me in your mind and heart, what is it about Mississippi that would make Mississippi the birthplace of America's music?
Blues.
It's blues.
It's blues.
Yeah.
You know, like there's not like I can't think of like a Kentucky's blues. And I am no historian and I am not an expert on music of any kind. I just know what I've heard and what I listen to. And it's all kind of folklore that's been passed down to me. I haven't done an in-depth study or anything, but my perception of it is that, kind of Bill Monroe's kind of our kind of claim to fame as far as like foundations of what country music is. But a lot of Bill's influences were, I think, kind of jazz musicians and things like that. But also the blues are in there because the chord structures are that in bluegrass. They're just sped up a long way.
That's right.
So I don't know. It's all just going to come back to blues. I've said this 10,000 times in many other interviews. Like, it's all just the blues. We might change the instruments and the singers might sound different.
Right.
And even the subjects might be happier or whatever. But ultimately, American music is grown from that seed.
That's right. Yeah. I think the American story is the story of the blues and vice versa in a lot of ways. I mean, there's that famous Faulkner quote that, to understand the world, first you got to understand a place like Mississippi, and I think that's what he's talking about. Just all of our bright shining moments, but all of our darkest chapters too. And that format of music is so perfectly suited for telling that whole story. And with Bill Monroe, even I'm spacing on the name, but I know that an early influence of his, from talking to a friend at the Country Music Hall of Fame, was a black man who was a blues musician and probably played some jazz too.
Yeah. I think a lot of those songs are based on jazz songs.
Yeah.
Like jazz. Some of them, I think Bill would claim I'm not trying to start any controversies here, but I've always heard that a lot of those songs things he picked up in New Orleans or.
I mean, one of his earliest hits, Blue Moon in Kentucky, was sung by Elvis, and you can trace that back to those blues roots there. Have you spent, I don't know how much time you spent in Mississippi, but.
I haven't spent, other than playing gigs.
Yeah. I'm just curious of your time in Mississippi, if you've ever been near any of those landmarks or famous places. Like we got Tupelo, Elvis's birthplace, all the places in the Delta, of course, here in Philadelphia. But if you had a spot in your mind, maybe you've been to it, maybe not, that if you were to talk to somebody who was planning a trip to the state, you'd be like, you got to go there first.
Well, Elvis's birthplace is in Mississippi.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've been there, and I think as a tourist in Mississippi, and a musical tourist, I might start there because that's a very, easy line for people to go, okay, Elvis, and then this, and then maybe, I don't know if there's B.B. King places to go to.
Yeah,
to visit,
Indianola.
So, I think maybe you can start with Elvis, but, it's kind of like, and I know that they have things to go see, like they've preserved his childhood home and things like that. So, but I, forgive me, Mississippi tourism, if I don't know all the right things to say. I would love to know some of them myself because we do go to those things when we're on the road, and when they come up, like, I've been to that Elvis place, and I've been, when we pass through things, it's available to look at a museum that marks something in music.
Yeah.
We go to those things, whether we're in Florida or Washington State. If we're close by and we have a minute, we go check it out.
Yeah.
Because that's you'll find out something you didn't know.
Yeah.
And you'll be better for it.
That's right. Yep. And I count Memphis and New Orleans in the scheme of Mississippi anyway. And I
kind of do too, but I didn't want to say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
You're from
Marty
Mississippi,
refers
you
to
can say that,
it as North Mississippi. And I mean, where did they all come from? You know, all those great folks out of Memphis, most of them came up from South, you know, from Mississippi. And so, you know, I think about that, like Elvis's birthplace, then you got to see Graceland, because that's the American dream in two houses right there, you know.
Well, it's a neat juxtaposition between going and seeing like his birthplace and the place that he grew up, and then going to Graceland.
Yeah.
That's it's a way to follow his life through architecture.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
It's like this one room place that I guess he was born in that place too.
So.
And then you can go see where he wound up, you know.
Yeah.
But those things are cool.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I got one last thing to ask you before you get out of here. And once again, thank you so much for being in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and supporting the Congress of Country Music.
I said it out there when we were doing the little dedication of the mural on the street. You know, when Marty walks in and asks you to do something, or calls you up to ask you to do something, I don't think there's a time that he's asked me to do something and I've said no to it, because I just love him and respect him so much. Yeah. So,
do you have a favorite Marty story?
A favorite Marty story? I don't know if I can tell them all on here, but I don't know. I always just love where. Have you ever played on stage with him very much?
Just a couple times.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when he's out with us, he'll hop up with us in our set and play. And on occasion, there'll be moments where I have to play a guitar solo, and in order to end it, he might have to do something else.
Right.
Except sometimes he just for fun, he'll hang you out there a little bit, and he'll just be like, "I keep going."
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I don't have that much. My well is not as deep as his. Let's say that.
Yeah.
So I run out of stuff after about a couple rounds. So sometimes he'll do that just to mess with you.
Oh, I love it.
But just, you know, it's all in good fun. It's
of course. No, that's great. That's the best.
Yeah.
That's the best. So you get 4 spots. Who's on your Mississippi Mount Rushmore?
Mississippi Mount Rushmore? Well, I'm going to have to look at a list because I'd leave somebody out.
All right, let's see.
I'm definitely putting B.B. King and probably Elvis.
Yeah, okay.
And
of course, we got Pops.
And then Pops, well, there's 3.
All right.
We've already discussed.
And you can do literature too if you want, you know, Faulkner, Eudora Welty, any of that. But then we got Marty. We got
well, I got to put
Charlie Pride, a bunch of it.
I'm going to put Marty in there.
There you go.
I'll put Marty in there because he's the reason I'm here.
There you go.
And the reason that I have any real connection, I guess. He's my connection.
Yeah.
My real one, you know, like, so I'm going to put Marty in there.
I love it.
I don't think people understand how much he dedicates himself and his life to promoting Mississippi music, but just music and
country music.
Other country music and younger artists. And
well, we were there that day at the Hall of Fame when they celebrated his donation to the Country Music Hall of Fame, all of those artifacts. I mean, I think you played either George Jones's guitar or Hank. Who's Old Martin was that?
Oh,
Why Me, Lord, you sang. It was Johnny Cash's
guitar. It was Johnny
guitar.
Cash's guitar,
yes.
But it also belonged to Hank Williams.
That's right.
Senior.
Yes.
So, and the first time I ever wrote a song with Marty rolled up in his Cadillac and pulled a guitar out of the back of in a gig bag, walked in and unzipped it, and I noticed it had Cash inlaid on the top, and I was like, "Is that Johnny Cash's guitar?" He's like, "Well, yes, it belonged to Hank Williams actually, and then it belonged to Johnny, and now it belongs to Marty."
Now that's your Marty Stewart story right there. Good
there
Lord.
You go. And I'll never forget that, and it just, you know, knowing what an artifact that was, and that he chose to just bring it to a writing appointment, and it was in a gig bag, and he just, you know, it was in the trunk of his car, you know, like
they want to be played. They want to be played. Yeah,
they want to be played, and I love that about him too. Like it's he loves all the artifacts. He wants to take care of them, but he wants them to be played. And so that's what I played that night.
There you go, man. Thank you, Chris Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you.
Mississippi on the Map is brought to you by Visit Mississippi. Learn more at visitmississippi.org. Your host for Mississippi on the Map is yours truly, Charlie Worsham. You can check out my latest tour dates and music at charlieworsham.com. The show is engineered by Troy Dixon. Next up on Mississippi on the Map, you'll hear a conversation I shared with Yazoo, Mississippi native and former governor of Mississippi, Haley Barbour. whose administration launched the campaign upon which this podcast was founded, Mississippi, Birthplace of America's Music. Thanks for listening.